Chamber of Commerce, as it calls itself, is waging an outright campaign of fear, trying to block Buy American provisions in that so-called stimulus bill. Joining me now, two lawmakers leading a very important fight, trying to assure those Buy American provisions are kept in the legislation. Congressman Dan Lipinski, Democrat of Illinois, joins us, along with Congressman Don Manzullo, Republican, also of Illinois. Gentlemen, good to have you here. What is the effect of the Buy American provision that you've put forward?
Well, in the bill last week in the House, I was to the Rules Committee to put a really strong Buy American provision into the bill, to bring it to the floor, an amendment, so the representatives would have a chance to vote on it. And unfortunately, that was not allowed by the leadership. Fortunately, the Senate has put some language in, but I'm not convinced that it's strong enough, and there's always a chance that it can be taken out.
I would be satisfied with the enforcement of the present Buy American laws. And what Congressman Lipinski and I are trying to do is to impose transparency, to give the American companies an opportunity to bid, to get the procurement officers on their toes to realize that they have to follow these Buy American laws that are already on the books.
The Chamber of Commerce has written a letter to the congressional leadership, which has already disavowed your efforts. Speaker Pelosi, naturally, is calling it, quote, trade restrictive. They say, and I'd like to show this for all of our viewers, quote, without sales abroad and access to inputs, many U.S. workers would be out of a job. Now, I think the Chamber of Commerce, gentlemen, rather than tell you what I think of them, you tell me what you think of that organization.
Well, the Chamber certainly doesn't do what's best for middle-class Americans and American workers. We all know what their real purpose is, to help the multinational corporations. And it's sad to see that they have as much influence, and we've seen editorials in newspapers. The elites really do not like this Buy American provision. But I tell you, in my district, 90% of the people say, I don't understand why it would not be there. Congressman
Manzullo, your reaction to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce?
Well, I don't think they really understand what we're trying to do. Let me give you an example.
Sure, Congressman, sure they do. They've been around. They bought a president for 8 years, for crying out loud. They know what they're doing.
When I chaired the Small Business Committee, I found out that the Army was violating U.S. law by buying berets for American soldiers from China. We held the hearing and we stopped that. That's the type of things that I want to see stopped. If we just enforce the present Buy American laws that are on the books without any new existing legislation,
gentlemen, what does it say about this country? If an organization that calls itself the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is opposed to the manufacturing of American products, is opposed to putting money, stimulus money, in the pockets of American workers and American businesses, particularly small business, which generates 80% of the jobs. What in the world is going on in this country? Are we that far gone, Congressman?
I really think that for much too long, we've seen the middle class under assault in this country because the laws have been made to help the multinational corporations. And the American people, it's time that they stood up. In the stimulus, we need to have strong Buy American provisions. That's why Representative Manzullo and myself are sending a letter, getting signatures. If you want to call your representative, please do that. Send a letter to Barack Obama, who his press secretary said...
How about Nancy Pelosi, for crying out loud? She doesn't even apparently know what country she's in.
Lou, I have voted for every free trade agreement. I've been here, this is the beginning of my 9th
You and I are not going to get along well, Congressman, telling me that.
Just a second. Dan Lipinski has voted against every free trade agreement. What we are saying here is, at the minimum, at least let's enforce the present Buy American laws that are on the books. Let's encourage the procurement officers in the state, local, and federal level
I've known you a long time. Can I raise my hand and just ask this? Can we move past the minimums in this country and start talking about the right thing to do, the intelligent, responsible thing to do, and start putting the country... I mean, you have the guts to go out and put that Buy American provision forward. Let's have the guts together to make it stick and mean something. What do you think of that?
Well, that's what we did we've done that several times. I mean, for example, it's federal law that when a Defense Department buys titanium, it has to be U.S. We stopped the importation of a lot of Russian titanium just by enforcing the laws that are on the books.
Yeah, well, you left U.S. in Chamber of Commerce, didn't you?
Well, I don't, you know,
Don Mazzullo, thank you for being with us. It's a joke. It's a joke, Congressman. It's a bad joke, perhaps, but a joke. We appreciate it. Congressman Lipinski, we wish you both well and applaud your efforts, gentlemen. Thank you. Up at the top of the hour, Campbell Brown. No bias, no bull. Campbell, what are you working on?
Well, Lou, we're going to hear much more of President Obama's meal.